Hey up Leeds, and welcome to this episode of Light on Leeds. My name is Hazel Millisham and I will be your podcast guide. On this week's episode we have c.lightman. She holds walks around Lawnswood Cemetery and she gives talks on the history of the people who are buried there. She tells me how she thinks Lawnswood is the most romantic cemetery in Leeds, about how the walks began in 2008, and tells me some fascinating tales about Leeds past and some of its colourful past residents. I think you're going to really enjoy this one. Have a listen. This is the Light on Leeds podcast, and the guest this week is c.lightman. Anne, thank you so much for joining me remotely.
Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. So, Anne, you have come along today to tell me about you're organising walks for spring 2023 in Lawnswood Cemetery. Can you tell me a little bit about why Lawnswood Cemetery is so interesting?
Well, it's a wonderful cemetery. It is supposed to be the best romantic cemetery, i.e. garden cemetery with beautifully serpentine paths, wooded background, etc., in the whole of Britain.
Really?
That's from a book I got on churchyards, so I was a bit surprised to find it. I will say at this stage I've never been around all the cemeteries in Britain. I've only been to a couple of others ever, but it's basically got the history of Leeds there, because the great and the good of Leeds, after 1875 when it opened, or 1876, first burial, they are buried there. So we've got some wonderful, wonderful people who made Leeds what it is.
That's really fascinating. And so can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved with Lawnswood Cemetery in the first place?
Yeah, well, I suppose it goes back to when I lived in Adel. I'd lived there for, I suppose 30 years when this started, but I lived there for a total of about 40 years. My husband was in poor health for the last 10, and it meant we couldn't really travel anywhere much. So I decided I might as well travel back in time and got really interested in history. And a friend and I started up the Adel History Group. Now, Lawnswood is in Adel. She was very much more concerned or interested in Adel Church, the Adel historic environment, etc. And I got sort of not landed with, but I took over the more peripheral subjects. And at one time, we worked with the Leeds, what was then the Leeds Metropolitan University, now Leeds Beckett University, and I was asked whether I would find projects for students to do. Well, I found a couple, and then the teacher in charge suggested Lawnswood Cemetery. I knew nothing about it, so a friend who's recently died was sort of dragged in, and she showed us around. And from then on, I've been interested, and she and I were two of the original founders of the Friends of Lawnswood Cemetery, which opened in 2011. Basically, you will notice, if you know anything about Leeds, that any bit of green space has a Friends of group. Yeah. Leeds City Council have been amazing in promoting it. I don't think there'd be a Friends of Lawnswood without them pushing from the background to get one. So, and one of the objectives of the Friends is to promote the cemetery. And really, that's what I've been doing. At one time, there was a lawyer who conducted walks which were absolutely brilliant. I wouldn't say I was in her league, but I've done them since 2008, so I've got a fair level of confidence now, and certainly because my background is in teaching, I am totally capable of answering questions that are thrown at me or avoiding them, I suppose. It doesn't faze me. And I was tailing off on that a little bit. And then, of course, the pandemic comes along. And what are we encouraged to do? Go out, walk, use our green spaces locally. So many people were interested in their local space, Lawnswood Cemetery. And I know a lot about it now. So I've done these walks. And, well, quite honestly, I'm blown away by how they've been received. I'm full for the March the 19th and the 26th, so I've put in the March the 18th and the 25th so people can still come on, but on a Saturday, not a Sunday.
That's amazing. And did you so was it I imagine the walks were already popular pre-COVID, but then you sort of noticed a boom because people were
Yeah,
appreciating the outdoor space more.
absolutely. The one thing about Lawnswood for walking around is that it's got lots of paths, as you would expect. So if the weather is horrid, you can still get around. And, there's a lot of people live around that area and they were just sort of intrigued. We've got some stunning monuments. There's four grade two listed monuments. And yeah, they are a little bit on the wow side.
Really.
Yeah. So people are interested, and obviously, when you go to a funeral at Lawnswood, all you see is a teeny little bit just from the road up to the chapel, and that's it. It's a 53-acre. We don't cover the 53 acres, but it is that size, and that's about 20 football pitches to put that into context.
Wow, that's amazing.
It
And
is. It is amazing.
is there a particular story attached to Lawnswood Cemetery that is your favourite?
Difficult to say, really. There's one that is quite intriguing. He's called Ross Valley, Max Louis Ross Valley, I think his full name is. I haven't rehearsed this, but he was basically a Jewish immigrant to the United States. He fought in the Civil War. He was a surgeon, and he was doing amputations, etc. And there was this little drummer boy that he amputated a leg and an arm from. The poor little lad died. But Ross Valley was so impressed by this lad's faith in his Christian faith. He refused, for instance, to take alcohol to ease with the pain. He just said, "I will trust the Lord," and went through with the operation on that basis. Just amazing. So he eventually left his Jewish faith behind and converted. He wrote it up basically, and was a leaflet that was a absolute, well, we would say it went viral, but I don't suppose they said that in those days. It swept through the American Bible Belt. It went down to Australia. It was one of the biggest selling pamphlets in its day. And it was his story of his conversion, from this little lad. Apparently, he was in somewhere like, I think it was New York, on a cold winter's night, saw a mission house door open, went inside basically for the warmth, heard a story, the gospel, etc. And then people were getting up to say things, a bit like a Quaker meeting maybe today. And a lady stood up and said, I'm terminally ill, or she wouldn't have used those words, but my one dying wish is that my son's wish before he died came true, and that the surgeon who operated on him came over to the Christian faith. And in the story, it says that Ross Valley got up, walked across, shook the lady by the hand and said, "I am that surgeon, I am converted," which is a very big deal for a Jew, because he basically lost his German family because they disowned him. And he comes to England with a young wife, so presumably he lost his United States family as well. And then he made his living in Leeds, was a Methodist, and he went around with his wife doing talks throughout the north of England, which is wonderful for me as it's sort of looking in the papers, because all the rabbis were objecting to what he was saying, but he would say what he believed to be the Jewish way of life and give little tales. So I can follow him around Sunderland, Newcastle, etc. And his money is going towards the Jewish welfare in Leeds, and he set up a sort of medicine, giving out medicine. And he's buried in Lawnswood. And there's a plaque. There's two plaques next to his grave. One from the one's Confederates, one from the other side, the North and the South Americans, in the United States, and basically they both claimed him. We don't know why he came over here, whether he was considered to be a spy, etc. No idea. But it's an unusual story to find in Leeds, I think.
It absolutely is. Yeah, it's a fascinating story. When did they actually stop burying people in Lawnswood Cemetery, or is it still open?
It's closed. You've tested my they kept open a green burial area. That was the last, and that probably closed about 5 years ago. And I would say for general burials, unless you've got a family plot, that probably stopped about 20 years ago.
And are you able to sort of, when you look at the beginning of the cemetery to the end, does it show you kind of a picture of how Leeds has been through the ages?
It does. I tend to concentrate on the early ones because it is so much easier to do the research. You've got the censuses. Well, they only go up to, I hope I'm right in saying, I think 1921, but you'd have to pay. So basically, I've stopped at 1911.
Right.
The Victorian papers were so much better with obituaries than today's papers. The other thing is, if I'm leading groups around, I really don't want to be standing next to a grave that is still tended by somebody. And,
Of
the
course.
mourners come up and there's me using it in a way. I hope I don't sound as if I'm using it as a tourist attraction. But in essence, I suppose that is what I'm doing. And I just feel that's disrespectful. So I tend to concentrate on the older areas.
Yeah, of course, I can understand that. That
But
makes sense.
yeah, you can see the history of Leeds. I mean, we're such a diverse city, and the diversity comes out because obviously people are commemorating their loved ones in their own languages. So I can't tell the difference between Russian and Polish, but I've been around with a lad who could, and he was saying that's a Polish one, that's a Russian one. And you can certainly see the Russian crosses, which are quite distinctive because the bottom cross is diagonal.
Ah,
So, it's a different, you can tell. And there is supposed to be one section which is, let me see, I think it's Latvian. Whether it is or not, I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, we have even in the Victorian section, there's lots of German names and you name it. We've got one Jewish person who was president of the Board of Guardians, so a really leading Jewish figure, and he was cremated. I suspect, I've often wondered why, because if you were Orthodox now, you tend to choose burial over cremation. And he was cremated, and that was in 1909, I think it was. So very, very early. But I think we were far, far behind Germany and France when it comes to cremations. So I think probably he thought it was okay because of the German background.
right. I see. Oh, wow, how
They
fascinating.
had to get the rabbi in, the Reform rabbi from Bradford, rather than the rabbi of the synagogue that he actually attended in Leeds,
Mm.
who actually did do something, did a service in the house as you would expect, but so he didn't wash his hands of it entirely. Yeah, there's lots and lots and lots of stories.
And have you ever heard any stories about any sort of ghostly hauntings? Does that sort of come up with Lawnswood Cemetery?
No, we have got one notable Grade 2 listed grave with Ethel Preston, an effigy, is it? A statue of her anyway. She's quite short because I'm tall, 5 foot. Well, it was 5'10". I might shrunk slightly, but she's comes up to my shoulder, I think, dressed in an Edwardian dress, and she's white marble, and people find her a little bit ghostly, but no, I haven't come across any. I don't particularly like being there at dusk. I have waited for an undertaker once at dusk and saw a fox, but that's not very unusual, is it? So, yeah, I tend to keep to broad daylight if I can.
I don't blame you at all.
Well, you see more birds and wildlife, so yeah,
Of
well,
course, yeah.
birds anyway. Yeah.
And have you found that do sort of tastes change about the kind of things people want to hear about?
Now, I don't think I'm the best person to ask that question because I'm not sure I'm that good a listener nowadays. Basically, it takes quite a lot of research to put a walk together because I have to investigate the lives of, say, it could be 6 or 7, maybe more people. And so I tend to do that and hope it'll sell. People are not coming up to me and saying, would you do a walk on such and such on the
Right.
whole? One has happened, and that was the arts. I did a walk for Leeds Art Fund. So, their name, they didn't ask for a walk featuring the arts, but I thought, well, that's what they'd be interested in. So I did a walk on that.
And then I bet there was a lot to include.
Yes, there was. For instance, Sunnybank Mills, we've got the gentleman who actually built that into the place, into the mill it is today, where the sewing bee comes from in Farsley. So Edwin Woodhouse, not the Gaunt family, just before the Gaunt family took it over. And he lies in Lawnswood. He was a Lord Mayor of Leeds, and I have done the Lord Mayor's walk. I think, yeah, far too many Lord Mayors. I think we've got, I've forgotten, is it 14 or 16 of them? Well, I didn't do all those. I'm not that fit that I could get around them all on one afternoon.
And do you find yourself, when you go on holiday or you visit in other places, are cemeteries somewhere, a place that you tend to go and have a look around?
Yes, they are now. I do have, in inverted commas, a professional interest in having a look. And I must say, after my husband died, a couple included me in their holiday to Rome. It was a group tour, basically, with other people, but they took me under their wing, and we stayed longer because we were flying from Leeds Bradford. The others were going from London. And we went on the last day, and we went to the non-Catholic, so basically British or whatever, cemetery in Rome, which was interesting because this enormous Ethel Preston tomb, her husband said that he was inspired to build that, or get somebody else to build it, to commission it, because by a trip to Italy where such things are common. Well, I can categorically say that they might be common in other parts of Italy, but they're not common in that cemetery I went to. They'd got nothing to compare, although they'd got really important people buried there. There were a few sort of household names. And I love picking up other leaflets as well, how they promote the cemetery, yeah.
I bet you've learnt an awful lot as well through doing all of your walks.
It's the one thing I think that keeps me going. It's the research, and yeah, I have learnt a tremendous amount because, I could include a medical person. Well, I had no medical background. I can include engineers. Well, I'm fascinated, but my knowledge of engineering is zilch, or what I'm learning basically, and I learn such a lot. Sometimes from the groups I take around, especially if they're like, I took industrial history group, and they explained to me what certain engineering terms meant because I just was reading them out from what I'd read, and thought, well, they can tell me and they can translate this into English. So yeah, it was quite fun, was that?
Oh, that's great. I bet it's fantastic when it's sort of two-way like that, and you both learning from each other.
But even a sort of general one. As I do start as a rule I should always do, and I think I do, that I'm used to taking questions. So, please ask. But I think I also talk too much. So I think probably by the end of the tour, they're just hoping nobody asks a question in case she starts up again.
I'm sure that's not true.
Yeah, well.
And so some of the other walks that you've been involved in organising, one of them particularly I'm interested in because it's links to Leeds University, which is that's where my day job is. Can you tell me a little bit about that one?
Yeah, certainly. Basically, let me think. Leeds University in the very early days was more like an industrial college. It was developed for and by the people, the industrialists in Leeds. So somebody who was had a mine, he sponsored the Institute of Mining College, which, it's not called that now, but the School of Environmental Studies, I think it's something of that ilk now.
Yeah.
That's a direct descendant.
Oh, wow, I did not know that.
Well, I'll tell you one thing you probably don't know. We've got the most gloriously named Obadiah Nussey. And he's included in this walk. I wouldn't dream of not including him because he's a gentleman who went to London. He was a wool merchant, and at that time, the wool industry were getting worried because they were losing out to Germany and France that were galloping ahead on the technical side.
Right.
And there was a great feeling that Britain must catch up with our, technical education. So he went to London. He was a member of the Clothworkers Guild, and the Clothworkers Guild were very aware that they needed to invest in education. And he said, well, why don't you invest in Leeds? And you think of how many millions over the years. I mean, I can't remember, but it was before it was Leeds University. It only dates back to 1906. This was Yorkshire College, maybe, or Yorkshire College of Science. Has been one or two. And when I'm doing the walk, I do have the facts in front of me. Mm-hmm. But he was, way before it was university, and he got the Clothworkers Guild to invest in Leeds. Well, you think you've got the Clothworkers Hall.
Yes, it's beautiful as well.
Yep. You've got you've still, I think, got some sort of textile departments.
Yeah.
Dyeing was invested in. They just spent the equivalent today of absolute millions. I haven't got it at my fingertips because it's a while. The walk was done, I think, last year. But yeah, we should be so grateful to that man for getting the investment here.
Yeah, how forward thinking of him.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot like that. In fact, I do have a list that I got off some website, I think it'll be the university, of the people that have been given honorary degrees by the university. And, I mean, there's Tetley. He was on my walk. That's the Brewers.
Yeah.
He invested in, well, his son was probably more important in Leeds University history, but certainly he invested in the chemical department. Henry McLaren's an engineer. He's on the walk. Very inventive chap. The problem with some of these is they're on several walks because he's also on the inventions walk. There's some that I hadn't realised. The Barclay Moynihan is on the Inventions and Trailblazer walk. I feel really embarrassed to say that I hadn't quite realised his connection to Leeds University, but he was a professor there, and so he should have been on the walk. I must say, when I started the walk about 3 years ago, there were a certain number. The next year there was one extra. The year after there was another. And now I think there's another 3 that could go on, so it'll be too long a walk.
You'll have to do a part 1 and part 2.
Well, that's what I ended up. I think I ended up with part 3 of the mayors and just forgetting about the 2 in the more modern section, which I know very little about, actually, because they are more modern. It's harder to do the work, the background.
So do you find that you don't sort of get bored of any of your subjects because you're always adding to your knowledge? Or do you have certain things in your mind where you think, when I've got a bit of time, that's where I'd like to go next?
I've never got bored because basically I'm not a professional researcher, so I never find out all there is to know. And there's usually something that comes along or something else. One of the things that has prompted some of the walks is the fact that Heritage Open Days, you'll have heard of those, as a fortnight in September. And we've usually done walks for that, and they always have a theme. So I try and get a walk that resonates with that theme, hence the inventions one. It was Astounding Inventions was last year's theme. This year's theme is Creativity Unwrapped. Unfortunately, because I've got these walks that I'm giving in March, April and May, I don't really have time to research a new walk under that theme. I could do it for the year after. So it's going to be like one of those comedy programs. I could be a year out of sync with the themes, I think. But, I've sort of got a list already of the people I could easily include in that walk.
Yeah.
So private groups have asked me to do walks. So they sometimes, like the Leeds Art Fund I mentioned, well, obviously they're into art. I'm a member, so I did know that. Even the name would tell you. So I do something that I think's relevant to them.
Yeah.
The industrial history group, they wanted one on industrial history, would you believe? Well, I concentrated on engineers, but I stuck in a few of the textile people as well. Yeah, so it
Fascinating.
comes from all different areas, really.
Yeah.
And the last one was that I thought I would rather like to produce a leaflet or a booklet or something as a guide to the cemetery. We have got one, which is superb, a self-guided walk with some of the about 10 monuments, but there's so many more. And I thought, well, I can't do a leaflet unless I'm pretty sure I know most of them. And I went on the Leeds Philosophical and Literary Society, quite a mouthful. They've got a most superb website, and went through the presidents of the Phil and Lit. Basically, I can print off a list. I then sit in front of the computer. There's a lovely, lovely website I use a lot called Yorkshire Burials. I can check if they're buried in Lawnswood. So I go through the list, see which are in Lawnswood. I discover two new people that are incredibly important in Leeds history that were not on my radar at all. And
Wow.
as I say, I've been doing it from 2008, so there's quite a few people I know about. Yeah, and I've
Fantastic.
not been doing it alone neither. There are other people involved. I said it's a friends group
Yeah,
got started. So, yeah. So that, it comes from all sources, basically.
of course. And so for the walks that you're doing at Lawnswood Cemetery,
Yeah.
how can people find out about those?
Right. Well, there is a magazine called The Squeaker, and they've got it listed. They've got a good website, and you can actually read the magazine online. So the March, I've forgotten which number it is. I haven't got that down. But the most recent booklet, you can go through it. The walks are towards the back of the leaflet, and that lists them. They've been circulated in Adel via the councillor, who is very supportive of me. He's been a good friend for years, Barry Anderson and his wife. So I've also printed some leaflets, and they've been given out at the Leeds Association of the National Trust, which meets in Headingley. I've sort of done quite a bit of publicity in local magazines and the like, yeah.
Yeah, of
In fact,
course.
that's how you got to hear of me, I think, through
That's right.
one
Yeah.
of the magazines, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And you said, I'm pretty sure you said in your leaflet that it is for sort of mixed ability, so nobody has to worry that they're going to end up on a 4-hour
No,
hike in difficult terrain or anything like that.
but basically, people can leave the walk at any point. I've usually had most of them at the end, I'm pleased to say, but if everybody lost, I think I might just be thinking there's something wrong with the walk. But yeah, I will at the outset, tell them where they're going. And Lawnswood, of course, is quite flat. It's got paths. I don't take people on covered paths if I can help it.
Yeah.
I turn a blind eye if you would find it safer to just sort of go on the grassy bits. It doesn't worry me particularly. I mean, it's not that pristinely kept. We do they do the best, but yeah, there isn't, as a rule, a problem. And of course, nowadays, in a big group, there's usually others around to help. Although I've not had that as a problem when I've been leading a walk.
Of course, yeah. And so, Anne, can I ask you, have you lived in Leeds all of your life?
No, I'm originally from Wales. I came to Leeds, I went to Huddersfield first in 1972, worked at the Huddersfield and Spen Valley Chamber of Commerce as it was then. I think it ended up as the Kirklees and Wakefield by the time I left. I then taught in Leeds, and I moved when I married in 1974. So it's going back a while.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
so
that means
I
that
love Leeds. I really do. I think it's a
oh, I'm
great city.
glad. And so that means that you are definitely qualified to answer the 3 questions that I ask every guest. The
Right.
first one being, what would you say is great about the city of Leeds?
It's difficult with that question to know where to begin. Because I'm promoting Lawnswood, I'm going to say green spaces. I
Yeah,
mean, the lockdown showed that. I live in Far Headingley. I can walk onto Beckett's Park. I could walk into Headingley, go down the Meanwood Valley Ridge, the ridge, and then
Yeah.
down into Meanwood Valley. I could go up in the other direction, walk to Addle. I can go down Butcher Hill onto the canal. It's just amazing. My great niece came, well, she's 50, it sounds as if she's two, doesn't it? Came up to stay with me. They come quite frequently, and we were walking around St Aidan's, which is in East Leeds, the RSPB Nature Reserve, which is just amazing. And she said, Anne, do you know, I don't think I can think of anywhere near us that has such flat walking. And I thought, no, because everywhere around where you live, where I came from, Mid Wales, Shropshire border, it's all owned by other people and they won't really want you on their land. Whereas in Leeds, you can, most of it's owned by Leeds City Council, I think. But I mean, you just go in any direction and you're on paths. It's just amazing.
I completely agree. Yeah, I'm a huge fan, and I've actually become part of the Friends of Crossflats Park because I live in Beeston.
Yeah.
And I
I
agree.
know that one well as well. Cause
Yeah, and imagine you
my
must have
husband
Holbeck
used to
Cemetery as well.
Yeah, I used to work down Elm Elland Road, so yeah, I know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and Holbeck Cemetery is a pretty good one. There's some.
Holbeck is earlier than us, and they did their walks a lot earlier. They had a friends group far earlier, as does Beckett Street Cemetery, which is opposite St James's Hospital. That's another superb friends group with a wonderful, wonderful cemetery. Both of those are great. And of
Yeah.
course, yours has got the views of Leeds.
Yeah, that's right. Because there was a viewing platform, wasn't there?
I'm not sure. Don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if it's from the Edwardian or the Victorian times. There was a viewing platform that gives you a fantastic view, and then I don't know if it was around the millennium it got restored.
Oh, right.
And if you go to the back of the cemetery, you can still stand there, and it's just an amazing view across the city.
Yeah, it is. That is news to me, and that is wonderful news. But
Yeah,
you
should
see,
go and have a
what
look.
we don't realise nowadays is that cemeteries originally were places for people to parade, to
Yeah,
visit as parks. You could take your young children and sort of show this monument and say to them, if you work hard, that's how you can end up with that money. He started from nothing and he ended up as a mill owner. And,
yeah,
it was used to inspire. What happened was that World War One came along, especially after the Battle of the Somme in 1915, 1st of July. Virtually every street in Leeds is reputed to have lost somebody.
wow.
And they could not stand going to cemeteries. They just wanted to get away. And, my own mother thought it was a very weird occupation of mine, as did my husband. They had this idea that cemeteries were not places you visit. I think we're coming out of that now and starting to appreciate them as places of natural beauty and
Yeah, I think
certainly
so.
wonderful havens for wildlife because there's
Yeah.
very little traffic in them.
Yeah, definitely. And I've always just found graveyards personally to be a really peaceful place to be.
Yeah,
And also, I've always enjoyed history. And even if you don't know anything about history, just seeing the way the different gravestones are carved, or, just when you look at something and you see a little child who died when they were 3 or whatever, I just think it makes you really thoughtful.
yeah. I think that they're just the tranquility. And also, if you're feeling down, obviously, after I lost my husband, I wasn't particularly cheerful, maybe, but you could go into a park which is full of large families and dogs
Mm,
could be a little bit off-putting. Going to a cemetery, well, you're as cheerful as most people visiting it, let's face it.
yeah.
I just felt it was more compatible with me, really, at that stage.
Yeah,
And
I
I
think,
still love it.
yeah, there's like a communal feeling about it, I think.
Yeah.
That's how it makes me feel. I understand, horror films, things like that have probably not helped. But yeah, I've always found them very
Well,
calming.
I must invite you on a walk, mustn't I, then? It'd be
That's what
nice to see your
I will
face.
definitely be coming on 100%. And so if
Yeah.
you had to choose something not so great about the city, Anne, what would you go for?
Well, I suppose I'm going to say the transport. I mean, it really bugs me that. Well, I went to Saltburn on the train once. It took me an hour from Saltburn to Darlington. It took me an hour from Darlington to Leeds, and it took me an hour from Leeds to Headingley.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not on. It really isn't.
I completely hear what you're saying, and I say this on nearly every episode now, but I think I'm coming up to 150 episodes. I've been doing this podcast for 4 years, and I
Yeah.
would say we must be at like 99%. That's the answer for question two. If it's not transport, it's the roads,
Yes,
um,
well,
travel links. Yeah.
I put an alternative one if transport was just too boring, and it's terribly close to it because the air quality. I don't know if you can hear, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. If I get a cold now, I have this hoarse voice for months and months. I mean, last time it got cured because my mouth
Oh
swelled
dear.
up, and I ended up going to the dentist and getting antibiotics, which cured my throat. But yeah,
Did
I
you
think
did
we're
you feel like
stuck
you
with bad
noticed the
air
air
quality.
quality improving during COVID?
Yeah, yes, I think it was considerably better.
Yeah, I'm the same. I live in Beeston, in the back to backs, and it
Yeah,
made a huge difference. It's not like I felt like I particularly noticed it, like I'd read about it, but I didn't feel like I was noticing it day by day. But then during lockdown, everything just felt cleaner. The air felt fresher. There were
yeah.
no aeroplanes going over every couple of seconds. Yeah,
Well, you could just walk across the Otley Road blindfold without a car. I mean, it was just incredible.
yeah.
One of the things I was delighted to do, and I certainly haven't got the guts to do it now, was to cross the outer ring road on foot. Well, the way I normally cross that is to catch a bus and get off. If I could walk easily to the cemetery from where I live, but I'm not going to cross that ring road on foot if I can help
No,
it. But I
God,
did do in lockdown.
that's mad.
Mm.
Um, and if somebody had been a resident of Leeds for a very long time, would you be able to tell them about something that you consider to be a hidden gem that they might never have heard of?
Now, this is really going to surprise you, isn't it, Hazel? Can I say Lawnswood Cemetery?
Of course you can.
It's not actually that hidden, is it? Because it sprawls along the Otley Road. So I will. Next, opposite the cemetery is a car park, and on that car park wall there's 10 stone plaques, which
Right.
were I've discovered presumably advertising symbols for the stonemason that built the car park, basically. And whenever I point those out on the walk, nobody has ever seen them.
Isn't that
Um,
funny?
yeah. I mean, they're alongside the main road, but when you go to the cemetery under normal circumstances, I think the last thing you're thinking about is your surroundings.
Yeah.
And certainly if you're going it's a 40-mile, and you're looking at the traffic, you won't see the surroundings there. There's also a columbarium, which you may not know what that is. I certainly didn't.
No.
No, it's a huge building in Lawnswood. When it was built in 1934, it said it was probably the largest and most, I've forgotten the exact words, but the most impressive building to have been built for the containment of ashes.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's what it is. It comes from the Latin, and people who've done Latin, I have not, can tell me always that columbarium is a dovecote. But when it comes to England, the word doesn't have dove in its niches, it's got ashes in its niches. And
Ah.
so it's a huge whopping building. It makes me think of the World War One memorials on the continent. Not that I've visited those, but what I feel about them, it's got that monumental. It's huge, and there is a link to World War One with it anyway, which I won't go into now. But I sometimes find that people haven't seen that either. So those are my two hidden gems, if I
Well,
can
they're
help
really good
it.
now. Should definitely be looking out for the columbarium. I
Yeah.
just love it. I love the name. And so, Anne, what will you be doing with the rest of your day today?
Well, I am of an age where more or less my day is over now. But yeah, I'm doing a talk on to a group on Monday. Guess what on? It's on Lawnswood Cemetery, obviously. It's called Behind the Chapels, which enables me to treat it as a history lesson behind the chapels, i.e. the history of it, but also the landscape, what's in it,
Yeah.
as I've said in this interview. So I shall be looking at that because I usually I'm doing it in Meanwood, and so I shall be trying to, the final bit, I usually try and get slides that appertain to that district, so it's relevant.
Oh, right. So it's a work of gathering and collecting together all of your
I
information.
couldn't do that this morning because I was frightened if I did any practicing of my talk, I'd have no voice left for you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you coming to speak to me when you've got such a hoarse throat.
Well, I haven't got a sore throat, I can speak forever, but it doesn't sound too good to my ears, but still.
Oh, well, it sounded fine to me, so don't worry about that.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Anne. And what I'll do is I'll put lots of information and links in the podcast notes so that if people want to come along to any of your walks, they can do so. Thank you very much, Anne.
Thank you very, very much for inviting me. It's been a delight.
I'm sure that you'll agree with me that Anne Lightman talks so eloquently about Lawnswood Cemetery. If you'd like to go along to any of the walks, the next ones that are advertised are on April the 16th, there is the early years of the Leeds Museum, and on May the 21st, Innovation and Trailblazers. As usual, in the podcast notes, there's lots of information so that you can join in or see what walks you wouldn't mind doing. And Anne, as she says in the podcast, originally is from Wales, and so she chose to feature a track called Carrick Fergus. It's a beautiful song. It's by the Leeds Male Voice Choir, and I'd just like to say a big thank you to Rob Butler for sending me the file. Have a fantastic week, Leeds. I'm off on my holidays. Bye.
But the sea is wide, and I can't swim over, nor have I the wings to fly. I wish I had been a lonesome boatman to ferry me over to my